Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our first Better Together, Improving Diversity in the Rochester Section. My name is Ilana Stinnett. I am the Vice Chair for the Rochester ACS section, but I am also a co-chair, Vice Chair of our Diversity, Inclusion, Respect Committee for the Rochester Section. We're so happy you could join us tonight for our very first talk. If you are not already, please, you can follow the Rochester section on Facebook, Twitter, and our website to stay on top of what we are doing. Our committee, the Diversity, Inclusion, Respect Committee are here. We have been hard at work. We were formed last year, and one of the first things we did was we came up with a diversity statement for the Rochester section. And so this statement is what guides the work that we do and what events we try to hold in order to foster diversity in the Rochester ACS section. So with that, I will turn it over to Carla, who is going to get us started thinking more about this seminar series.
All right, so the section was awarded a Diversity, Inclusion, and Respect grant, which has the purpose to fulfill three major goals. We're planning to have 4 seminars throughout the year, where the goal is that attendees can learn about the achievements and experiences of Rochester area chemists and engineers and can have the opportunity to network with these professionals and other peers. Our hope is that these seminars can also attract new chemical professionals from the area, helping us reach more people and offer more chances to engage our local section members. We are confident that our featured speakers are more than inspiring and can motivate our local student communities to achieve their goals and dream big. We hope that the addition of an American Sign Language interpreter can help us embrace the large hard of hearing local community as well. These sessions will allow participants to interact with the speakers and the audience peers, and the hope is for them to exchange or get advice on how to establish and maintain a productive professional career and surpass the challenges or boundaries throughout early career development. We are targeting to strengthen the interactions and connections between high schoolers, undergrads, or grad students, and that they can make a support network. You can change it, Elena. So the agenda of today is looking like this. We have our speaker presentation. After that, we will have a Q&A session where you can unmute yourself and ask your questions or just drop them in the chat. James Sister will be moderating that and will be directing the questions to the speaker. After that session, we will go into small breakout rooms that are targeted to allow for networking between participants. We will wrap up the session with some closing remarks highlighting our upcoming events. All right, next. So today we have the honor to host Dr. Tommie Royster as our very first speaker on the seminar series. Dr. Royster has over 20 years of experience in technology development of electronic materials and thin film device fabrication processes. He received his PhD degree in inorganic and organometallic chemistry from the State University of New York at Buffalo. He started his career at Eastman Kodak Company, and the last 7 years of his tenure were spent directing and managing product development of organic light emitting diode, the so-called OLED, for consumer electronic products. Dr. Royster has been a significant contributor to the advancement of OLED technology and other electronic materials with a publication portfolio that includes 32 US patents and patent applications. He founded R Display and Lighting in 2012 to further advance OLED material technology. As the CEO, Dr. Royster leverages his material development experience to direct and lead the company in the design, development, and manufacturing of advanced light-producing materials for the growing display and lighting industry markets. With that, I will pass it to Dr. Royster with his talk entitled Career Opportunities in the Field of Chemistry, The Journey of an Inorganic Chemist. Dr. Royster, the stage is all yours.
We will make sure.
Okay, thank you, Carla, for that fine introduction. It is my absolute honor to have this opportunity to be the first speaker in your diversity seminar series. I think the goals that you guys have set up are to be commended. And so I look forward to forging new relationships as a result of this opportunity. So I was informed that we would have a diverse group of Zoom participants, possibly high school students, ranging out to undergraduate, graduate students, and professionals. So I tried to tailor the talk to cover aspects that would be interesting to the undergraduate students and potential high school students, and then we'll drill down into more detailed chemistry for the experienced chemists and postdocs that I know are present. So let's get started. Platforms for careers in chemistry are academic, industry, government, and entrepreneurship. And within these four platforms, there are research areas which have broad impact on our everyday lives: health and medicinal chemistry, environmental chemistry, personal care chemistry, and electronic materials, which we use every day. If we start out with advances in medicinal chemistry, we are all taking part in this Zoom participation because of the COVID-19. And so it is easy to relate the importance of chemistry and chemists in COVID-19 testing and recent vaccination breakthroughs that have been delivered. Beyond COVID, there have also been very recent new drug delivery techniques involving nanotechnology, which help the body absorb drugs more efficiently. There have also been new drugs developed for the curing of hepatitis C and new drugs for treating dementia. Environmental chemistry. This is something that we all are involved with in one way or another. But for a chemist, there are some exciting areas to be considered. Atmospheric chemistry, which takes a look at the acid rain atmosphere that impacts our environment. There is also the greenhouse effect that we need to consider. And then there's water contamination and purification chemistry that needs to be looked into. Soil contamination, renewable energy methods. All these areas are fertile ground for chemists with very eager and innovative ideas. Personal care chemistry. Now, we all are involved in using these products on a daily basis: skin care, hair care, personal hygiene care, oral care. How exciting might it be to consider being able to develop formulas that can be implemented and used by millions of people based on your chemistry and your innovation? I'm getting cotton mouth. Excuse me one second. Sorry. Chemistry for electronic materials are very important, and these materials play an important role in our everyday lives, even if we don't realize it. Shown here are the reactions involved in what is called metalloorganic metal deposition processes. This chemistry involves using group 3 transition group 3 organometallic materials with group 5 compounds to form group 3,5 semiconductors. The first reaction shown here, reacting trimethylgallium with ammonia, gives us the elimination of methane, forming gallium nitride, which is a high band gap material. The band gap is around 3.4 EV, which is a high enough energy to produce blue light, shown here in this blue LED. Blue LEDs are a relatively new discovery based on the new processes that can be used to prepare gallium nitride. They were discovered in the early 1900s. Trimethylgallium reacting with phosphine gives us gallium phosphide, which has a band gap of around 2.2 EV, which can be used to prepare LEDs that produce red and orange color light. The most interesting 3,5 material is gallium arsenide, which has a multitude of applications. So we react trimethylgallium with arsine to form gallium arsenide with the elimination of methane. Gallium arsenide forms semiconductor materials with a band gap of around 1.4 EV. And so this is a small band gap that's very useful for integrated circuit applications. And the most important aspect of gallium arsenide is that the material has very high electron mobility. Electrons travel extremely fast through gallium arsenide semiconductors compared to silicon. So our very high-speed computers can be fabricated using gallium arsenide. The high electron mobility is also useful for high-frequency devices such as our cell phones. So these group 3,5 semiconductor materials, again, play an important role in our everyday lives, and it's the metallo-organic deposition chemistry that makes it possible. Now I'm going to transition into my journey in looking at and researching electronic materials. I'm going to start with some interesting research that I developed while I was in grad school. And here I'm showing the reaction of dialkyl gallium cyclopentadienyl reacting with a secondary amine to form a gallium nitride bond with the elimination of cyclopentadiene. The importance of this reaction is the formation of the gallium nitride bond. In grad school, the interest evolved around using these materials as potential single source or single molecule precursors for preparing ultimately gallium nitride semiconductors. The problem is pyrolysis of pyrolyzing these materials ultimately results in incorporating impurities in the microstructure of the gallium nitride semiconductor. So it's not a process that can be competitive with the standard MOCVD process, the bimolecular reaction between trimethylgallium and phosphine or arsine. However, this facile reaction I have found has been very useful in developing other materials with various applications for electronic devices, including OLED devices. While I was at Eastman Kodak, one of the projects I worked on was the development of electronic materials, specifically electron transporting materials for OLED. Here, we're showing that we can use the lability of the CP ring in solution to react gallium cyclopentadiene with pyridyl benzimidazole to form this following gallium chelate. This material, based on its high LUMO electronic structure, provides a very efficient electron transporting material for OLED applications. Here's the basic structure of an OLED device. OLED device produces light very efficiently when a voltage is applied across the strategically layered organic thin films that are sandwiched between a cathode and an anode. The holes and electrons traverse across the organic thin films and recombine in what we call the emissive layer. And it is at this point where the energy is released in the form of light. And because this is a thin film process, it turns out to be a very efficient process in terms of energy usage for producing light. This is just a slide I threw in just to complete a little summary of the type of activities that I had at Eastman Kodak working on electronic materials. Here we're showing the use of tungsten carboxylate precursor materials to form thin films of tungsten oxide deposited over interdigitated electrodes. We carried out this chemistry to fabricate high sensitivity hydrogen sulfide sensors. And we were able to establish a strong correlation between voltage output of these interdigitated electrodes and the concentration of hydrogen sulfide that was expanded into a vacuum system which housed the thin film solid state sensor. And the important study showed that the microstructure was the key to increasing the sensitivity. You need to have an amorphous film. Crystalline films were not very sensitive. Okay, so that completes the Eastman Kodak study. I would now like to move on and talk about what is most exciting to me, which is my current work as an entrepreneur at our Display and Lighting. So here's our company mission. Our Display and Lighting was established to generate revenue through the design, development, and manufacturing of innovative emitter materials for the fast-growing OLED display and lighting industries. We consider the emitter materials the jewels of OLED technology. Shown here are the various products which incorporate OLED displays, HD TVs, our smartphones, laptops, tablets, etc. OLED displays have superior image quality and extremely fast refresh rates, along with being an energy efficient display. And these are the reasons why the industry is converting from LCDs to OLED displays at a fairly fast rate. So our focus, as I indicated, is on the emitting materials shown here in this schematic. The red and green and blue represents the individual pixels which can be deposited within an OLED display to give us an active matrix display to give us all the colors that we need. Shown here are two of the early emitter materials that we made when we were first embarking upon this new research. These are green phosphorescent emitter materials. The platinum complexes were fabricated using potassium tetrachloroplatinate, reacting in alcohol with the specially designed ligands. These ligands were fabricated using standard coupling chemistry. Here are some examples of the emitting materials that we have fabricated. Here are UV exposed solutions of several of those emitter materials demonstrating the broad emission capabilities that we have. And before we embark upon trying to incorporate these materials into an actual OLED device, we have to fully characterize the photoluminescent properties and the photophysics of these materials to make sure they're properly aligned to give us an efficient OLED device. I need to recognize all the support that we received here in Rochester from local universities. Most of our photoluminescence measurements were carried out at the Rochester Institute of Technology. And we also were privileged to work with Professor Louis Rothberg at the University of Rochester, in which he carried out some very important photophysics measurements for us. Specifically, he looked at the transient excited state lifetimes of these materials, which is an important property for determining whether or not you can achieve stability in an OLED device. One of the things that has been preventing the implementation of an efficient blue emitter is the extended lifetimes of phosphorescent emitters end up resulting in degradation pathways that degrade the OLED device very rapidly because of the high energy of the blue light. So the objective is to establish materials with a short excited state lifetime on the tens of nanosecond scale, as opposed to the microsecond scale in which you find yourself with most phosphorescent emitter materials. Shown here are examples of prototype devices fabricated using our proprietary emitter materials. The top left material was fabricated using a phosphorescent blue, and the material on the right is a newly developed charge transfer emitter. All the devices on the bottom were fabricated using standard phosphorescent emitters. And just to reiterate what I earlier stated, there's a long-standing problem with establishing high efficiency blue emitters with good commercial stability. Typically, there's a trade-off between good stability and efficiency. And it has been very difficult to combine the two. However, we're extremely excited about a recent breakthrough with our new charge transfer emitter materials, in which we have been able to show the combination of high light producing efficiency with photophysics that provide good device stability. Specifically, the transient lifetime measurements indicate that the excited state lifetimes operate on the lower nanosecond time scale. Specifically, we were measuring about 2 nanoseconds for the transient lifetime. And this is extremely exciting because now we can incorporate these materials into OLED devices and do a more robust study of the device fabrication processes that will give us extended lifetime for these devices. The OLED display panels are looking very promising in terms of the market opportunities. So if you look at the expected revenue forecast, you see by 2025, we're reaching above $50 billion. So this is a fertile ground for new innovative companies such as our display and lighting. And shown here, I'm just going over my leadership team, myself, Catherine O'Brien, and Shuha Chen operates as our program manager. Now, I kind of flew through that. Can I just give myself a check on the time? 6:28, okay. I'm gonna finish off with a slide that is speaking to the efforts of your Better Together initiative. I recently came across this terminology, neural diversity and innovation. And I found this quite fascinating because innovation is the ability to imagine something new. It is also the ability to try something new after you imagining it. However, our imaginations are influenced by our own individual experiences. And so this is why having diverse set of ideas in the room is always an advantage. The broader the pool of experiences, the broader the opportunities for innovation. So I certainly look forward to working to expand our reach to drive innovation by being more inclusive and establishing more diverse interactions in the chemistry community. So that was my presentation. I'm okay. Finished a little early, but I'm open for questions.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Royster. That was an amazing talk. Does anyone have any questions for Dr. Royster? I have one. So I talked with Dr. Rothberg a lot during my intake to the University of Rochester as a graduate student, and he was talking almost exclusively about how terrible blue emitters are currently. And so like, I'm really glad that you talked about that and expound on it more for us. You mentioned that the new blue emitters are on the nanosecond timescale for being good emitters. What would the red and yellow, red and green emitters be on the time range of? Is it also nanoseconds, or is it much faster than that?
So so the current products incorporate red and green phosphorescent emitters, which are on the microsecond timescale. However, the energy of red emitters is much lower than the energy of blue emitters, so you don't run into the same problems with respect to degradation pathways that are set up in the excited state. So the energy for blue is comparable to the energy of a chemical bond. And so during that time in which the excited state is susceptible to radical reaction pathways, you run into trouble. However, with red and green emitters, the energy levels, do not cause a major problem, but it is the trend that red emitters are more stable than green emitters, and green emitters are more stable than blue emitters, and that's just a consequence of the energy level of the light that's being produced. When you get to an energy level where you're capable of breaking bonds, then that's a difficult problem to overcome. And so you need to outrun those side reactions by reducing the excited state lifetime.
Lana had a question? No?
It was Dave.
Oh, Dave.
Hi, Dr. Royster. I had a question.
Oh, sure.
I'm really curious about your recent career pathway, because it seems like you've managed this transition that I always imagined would be really difficult, which is working in a really big industrial company where there's a lot of patents and a lot of intellectual property going on, and then you develop a lot of expertise and you want to move to a startup, or maybe you want to do your own entrepreneurial work. How do you sort of manage that transition between ideas that belong to, say, Eastman Kodak and ideas that are your own that you're able to move forward with?
Very, very good question. So certainly areas that were covered during my employee agreement with Kodak, I had to steer away from. But the thing to keep in mind is the the restrictions are limited. So you have maybe like a 2-year window in which you cannot really compete. And in our case, the intellectual property of the OLED technology was sold to LG. And so we had to go through an intermediate company that was housing those patents to make sure that there was no infringement. But after 2 years, then you're essentially free, as long as you're not, again, overlapping with technology that you specifically worked on while you were at Eastman Kodak Company. So for instance, I laid out the gallium electron transporting materials. I would not be able to use those materials without establishing an agreement or paying for a license agreement. But if I came up with an alternative way to make electron transporting materials that did not involve gallium or did not involve the claims that cover gallium, then you're okay. So the key is to make sure you fall outside of the claims that are in that specific patent that might be a potential problem. So you really have to study the intellectual property very carefully to make sure that you're not overlapping with the claims that have been established. But it is an area of concern for anyone that has worked in industry for a number of years and then wants to go out on their own and stay within that same field. You really have to navigate around the intellectual property restrictions. And so one of the things that I wanted to focus on, again, was a completely new class of emitter materials that would not be covered by not only Eastman Kodak Company, but by the other companies in the industry that have broad intellectual property claims that might cover my idea.
So it sounds like the challenge there might be, so if you have really new ideas, the challenge isn't necessarily the patent, but it's the non-compete clause in your, I guess it's your contract with Eastman Kodak that has that kind of non-compete for 2 years.
Non-compete for 2 years, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, interesting, thanks.
James, can I ask a question?
Sure.
I was wondering, so working at Kodak and then moving into your own business, how did that transition happen? And do you still, are you still immersed in the chemistry, or do you have to do all this extra stuff for owning your own business? And is it difficult to do that transition in that way? Dave was talking about the intellectual property part, but I'm just imagining your workload. Was it pretty
day-to-day? Yes, in particular, since we're going through COVID, it has been very intense in that I'm sort of a one-man show now. I've been working by myself in many cases, but just to lay out for you how I set up the operation, I'm currently leasing research laboratory space from Eastman Business Park, i.e. Kodak. I do have access to the analytical services at Eastman Kodak Company. I have to pay for those, so I submit a PO, and then that'll cover the expenses of any mass spec work that I might need, or any NMR work that I might need. So the day-to-day operations have not been that difficult in terms of having access to key resources to do the fundamental work in a laboratory. So over the years, I've had contract researchers work with me, and that allows me to come out of the lab and focus on the business part. But now, yeah, I've needed to physically go back in the lab and do experiments myself, actually. You know, the recent transient lifetime work that was executed by Professor Louis Rothberg, we worked together on that. I actually spin coated the materials on glass, drove them over to U of R. He met me in the back lot, and he had to do the measurements because he couldn't have any students around as well. So it was, you know, this is a new day, but it hasn't prohibited us from getting the work done. As I said, I'm excited about these new charge transfer materials, and I have Professor Rothberg to sort of thank in terms of you know, allowing me to look at these materials a little differently, because the photophysics initially were telling me that they were phosphorescent in terms of the Stokes shifts that I was seeing, the broad bands that I was seeing. But then once he measured the lifetime and we were able to show that it was essentially fluorescence emission that we were looking at, then we knew we didn't have phosphorescence. And I took a longer look at the actual molecular structure, and we're able to identify this donor and acceptor moieties. And then we were able to go back to the lab and more strategically design the materials for this charge transfer process that works out very nicely. And the unique aspect of the charge transfer process is that you're able to harvest the excitons that are generated in an OLED device in a similar way that phosphorescent emitters harvest the electrons. The reason why phosphorescent emitters are more efficient than fluorescent emitters is because 3/3 of the excitons are in the triplet excited state. And so the spin orbit coupling that you can achieve with phosphorescent emitters allows you to harvest those excitons. For phosphorescence, you can only at most extract out 25% of the, or convert 25% of the excitons, because only 25% are in a singlet state, which is the state from which fluorescence occurs. But with the charge transfer emitters, you have rapid mixing between the triplet and singlet states. And so you can harvest the triplet excitons originally generated in the OLED device by rapidly mixing with the singlet. And then you undergo what you call this hybridized process, where you have hybridized local and charge transfer state, which then can give you the fluorescence. So this is a unique process that you know, will allow us to harvest the fully harvest the excitons that are generated, but yet still give us the short excited state lifetime. So again, we're really excited about this particular combination that is unique to charge transfer emitters.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
So thanks for sharing this information. I'm still a graduate student, and I never worked in like an industrial setup. So I have a question in the perspective of like business. So when you start your business, like what would be the main factor that you look into? Like what would be the strengths of the company that to compete with like other company like I guess Merck, or maybe like Universal Display, some other like corporations?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. So Universal Display actually had established a pretty large roadblock for all other competitors that wanted to innovate in the space of phosphorescent emitters, because they had a very broad claim in one of their patents that was allowed, which essentially stated that any phosphorescent emitting material incorporated in an OLED device was covered by their intellectual property. So that really stopped even Kodak from doing any inventing or patenting in this space. You had to go through universal display, but that broad patent is no longer in play. And so that has opened up the door for new innovation in the space of phosphorescence. However, most new startups are trying to work on solving the blue stability issue because of the strong market position that universal display still has for producing red and green emitters. So the opportunity from a business standpoint really lies in producing the technology that is currently missing. And so you have the large companies such as Samsung and LG investing in small operations to try to get out from under the high licensing fees that they are currently paying Universal Display Corporation. So that's not to say that eventually red and green emitters will not be available, but right now the interest is solely in blue, and that is a fertile ground that Universal Display does not have any significant intellectual property in that space right now. But there are other competitors, as you indicated, such as Sonora or Clulux, and they're working on thermally activated delayed fluorescence, which is another new technology, but that technology also suffers from the similar fate that phosphorescent emitter suffers from, and that you have the long excited state lifetime. And so, they're trying techniques by combining their thermally activated delayed fluorescent materials with fluorescent materials to produce what they call hyperfluorescence. So you have energy transfer from the TADF material to the fluorescent emitter. And then that way you can reduce the excited state lifetime. But that technique is also not very straightforward. And so I believe that whoever comes with short excited state lifetime, high efficiency, high exciton harvesting capability has a chance to grab a hold of the market in a very strong way. And so that's what we're hoping that we can do. That was a long answer to your question. I don't know if that covered everything.
And we have time for one more question. This one was previously submitted. So were your graduate school earned skills easily transferable to your job at Eastman Kodak?
So yes and no. So when I was first hired into Eastman Kodak Company, I was not hired in as a synthetic organometallic chemist. I was actually hired into the analytical department. I skipped over this, but I spent a 6-month sort of postdoc at National Institute of Standards and Technology, studying in the analytical chemistry space. So my first assignment at Kodak was in an analytical group, and that's why I ended up trying to hold on to my electronic material skills by developing materials for solid state sensors. That was my way of holding on to it. And then at the time when I was hired, Kodak was still in the analog space. And so I was working for a time developing transition metal materials and main group metal materials that would be doped into silver halide products for traditional film. But once the OLED opportunity opened up, that is where I saw a strong connection and correlation between my trained skills and this business opportunity. So my advice is, if you're gonna if you're going to enter into industry, even if you don't necessarily have to enter into the ideal job that might translate well in terms of the skills that you're interested in still maintaining and practicing, but you should look for opportunities to make that transition if that's what you want to do. You know, some researchers want to change directions and work in other areas. I wanted to stay embedded in the area of electronic materials. So I had to navigate that in Kodak by looking for opportunities. And I wrote a proposal specifically showing how new materials could be used for OLEDs, and I presented that proposal to the inventor of OLED at the time, Ching Tang. And so once he was able to give a thumbs up, if you will, I was able to then go back to the management and convince them that I should transfer to this group. And that laid the foundation for where I am now.
Sweet. All right, thank you so much. And I will now pass the rest of the time to Alana.
Thanks, James. Give me just a minute. I will share my screen. So please join me in thanking our speaker very much for his talk. We wanted to allow this opportunity to give you a chance to talk to each other and get to interact with more of the people that we have attending this event. So Carla is setting up breakout rooms that we are sending you to. Opportunity, please, once you go in, introduce yourselves. We will be offering some questions if you need some ideas on what to talk about, but feel free to ask questions of people in the room. It's going to be randomly assigned, so there'll be people from all ages. And then we will come back and close out the event. We will have the interpreters stay in the main room. If you would like the assistance of one of them, please, you can message myself or Carla, and we will ensure that one of the interpreters is sent to your room. Any questions? Carla, are you good to go?
Good to go.
All right, so at this time, we will send you to your breakout rooms. Feel free to join, say hello, introduce yourself, and we'll see you back shortly.
I've enjoyed today enormously, and I hope you all have to. Thank you all for being here and for taking the time to join us and learn more about Dr. Royster's experience and career. James will put in the chat a Google survey where you can rate the event and let us know if there are any suggestions for the betterment of upcoming events. So now I'm gonna turn it into Elena so she can introduce you to some of the upcoming events that we'll have throughout the year.
Thank you so much. So just as a reminder, if you have not already or are not following us, here are our Facebook and Twitter links. There's a lot actually coming up. End of this month, YCC is hosting an event about ACS membership. There is also going to be a virtual collegiate research symposium in April. So, and then our second DIR seminar is coming up in May, as well as a Regents Chemistry Boot Camp that the YCC group, Younger Chemists Committee of the Rochester Section, is organizing. So be sure you are following us to hear more about these details. If you get the newsletter, you will also be notified as we have more specifics of these events coming up. With that, we also wanted to make you aware, part of the grant that we got from the National ACS was, in addition to hosting these events, to also make 12 educational videos about chemistry to help high school students. So we are looking for any volunteers who are interested in helping us make these videos. If you can contact James, his email address is here, and I'm sure he will put it in the chat as well. We look forward to hearing from you, and thank you for attending the event, and hope to see you at future events.